Chapter 4, Mishnah 1. Generally, an Am Haaretz is not believed if he claims that his produce is tithed. The following two Mishnahs lists exceptions to this rule. In these cases, the rabbis were lenient and allowed us to rely on an Am Haaretz testimony. We now turn to the words of the Mishnah. If a person buys produce from someone who is generally not trusted regarding Meiser, i.e. from an Am Haaretz, and he forgot to separate Meiser from it before Shabbos, and it is now Shabbos when it is forbidden to separate Meiser, even for Demai, and he asks the seller on Shabbos whether he had tithed it, if the seller says that the produce was tithed, he may eat the produce based on the seller's word. The rabbis allowed the buyer to rely on an Am Haaretz's testimony in this case, because Amei Haaretz are in awe of the holiness of Shabbos and are more afraid to lie on this day than during the week. However, once it becomes dark at the end of Shabbos, he may not eat the remaining produce until he separates the required meiser from it. If the buyer was unable to contact the seller on Shabbat, if he did not find the seller on Shabbos and thus was unable to ask him whether the produce was tithed, but someone else who is also not trusted regarding tithes, i.e. another Am Haaretz, said to him on Shabbos, I know that this produce is tithed, he may eat the produce based on his word. Just as the buyer may rely on the seller's testimony to eat the produce on Shabbos, so too he may rely on the testimony of another Am Haaretz. However, when it becomes dark at the end of Shabbos, he may not eat the remaining produce until he separates the required meiser, as explained above. In the next case, the Mishnah deals with meduma, which is a mixture of truma or trumas meiser and chulin. Since the mixture contains truma, it may not be eaten by a non-Kohen unless the truma becomes nullified in the mixture. Truma and trumas meiser become nullified in a mixture only if it contains 100 times more chulin. If a buyer separates trumas meiser from the produce of Demai, and it later returned to its place, i.e. it fell back into the produce from which it had been separated, thereby creating a meduma mixture, Rabbi Shimon ben Shizuri says, in such a case, he may ask the seller even during the week whether the produce was tithed. And if he says that it was, he may then eat the produce based on the seller's word. Since the produce was already tithed, it turns out that the trumas meiser he separated from it had no sanctity and did not forbid the mixture. The rabbis allowed him to rely on the seller, in this case, even on a weekday, because even Amei Haaretz, who are not Kohanim, are afraid to eat truma. They are therefore also afraid to lie and cause other non-Kohanim to eat trumas meiser, which is a form of truma.